Do new revelations prove that Queen Elizabeth was angered by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? What were the moving comments Katherine, Princess of Wales, made about her cancer treatment? But why have she and William been caught up in a cash for honours scandal? And why is the royal train being scrapped? We've got another unmissable show for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and back on today's panel are two of your firm royal favourites, the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Now, a reminder to viewers that we are still trying to hit 500,000 subscribers to this channel. We're going to get there, right? We are. And if you're not subscribing already, what are you waiting for? As I always tell you, it's free. And it means you will never miss another episode of your favourite royal show, or indeed the other great royal videos we have planned for you over the next couple of months. So, for instance, up next on this channel is a new episode of Acting Royal, so keep an eye out for that. Right, well, we've got so much to discuss this week that we need to get straight to our panel, but let's kick things off with news about the Princess of Wales. Here she is now.
Hi, it's Victoria. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Joanne.
You know, you put on sort of brave-faced stoicism through treatment. Treatment's done.
Yeah.
So I can crack on and get back to normal again, but actually that the phase afterwards is really, is a really difficult journey. You're not necessarily in the clinical team any longer, but you're not able to function normally at home as you perhaps once used to, and actually someone to help talk you through that, show you and guide you through that sort of phase that comes after treatment, I think is really valuable.
That was, of course, Katherine, Princess of Wales. Rebecca, tell us about that.
Well, I'd probably put in a little bit of context. She turned up, we were given about 24 hours notice on this, her going to a hospital, Colchester Hospital in Essex, and she's there ostensibly to unveil a wellbeing garden that they've created there for patients, and they were planting some of the 50 Katherine roses named after Princess of Wales, raising money for the Royal Marsden Hospital, into this garden. But she took a chance to sit down and have a chat with patients and with staff. And it was very clear, I think, she had a message that she wanted to say. And she was very much saying, I think as I wrote last week in a feature for the Daily Mail, that it's been really tough for her. It's been an absolute roller coaster this last year. You get through cancer treatment and you think, oh great, let's go, everything will be back to normal. And then suddenly you realise actually your life isn't the same, and it isn't quite so easy to do the things you took for granted before. And I think it was a slight plea for her, but not in a self-aggrandizing way, just more saying, look, it's not easy for any of us, so maybe just take it a little bit easy with me.
Absolutely. Richard, just drawing on Rebecca's point, like a lot of things that the royals say in public, you have to do a bit of reading between the lines, but it is a reminder that it's been tough for them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult sort of line to tread for Katherine, because on the one hand, she wants to be supportive of other people suffering from cancer, and she wants to give some details about her own illness and her own health battles, but she clearly doesn't want to give too much. She hasn't gone into details of what type of cancer she had or that sort of thing. But so it's kind of showing sympathy and solidarity with others at the same time as not revealing too much. And it's a difficult line, isn't it? Because, if you give some details, then people want to know more. And so I think at the moment she's, doing it very well in terms of showing her support for others. But it'll be interesting to see in the future if we do hear more about, what particular type of cancer she's had and what she's gone through.
I mean, perhaps with the benefit of time and some distance, that might be more forthcoming.
But I do think what happened this week was probably one of the most personal insights she's given. I mean, obviously we've seen the statements she's given, the video statements and those videos she's done with her family where she's talked over it about the experience. But I think this was very raw, actually, and very, very personal. And I think that was because they're aware that people are starting to say, look, what is going on? Why aren't we seeing her so much in public? And she's just saying, look, just give me time, I'll be back. But this experience has changed me as a person. Yeah. And I thought it was, very moving.
Yeah, indeed. Well, they wouldn't have welcomed, would they, Rebecca, that the Waleses, they've been caught up in a story about something involving cash for access.
Yeah, so this is a story in the Sunday Times. Basically, every year, William he plays polo. And he does a big fundraising event at Windsor, and he gets all his charities involved, and it raises about £1 million for charitable causes every year. Previously, him and Harry played a number of matches throughout the season. He's older now, he's got a family, he doesn't want to commit. So this is a big fundraising event for him. And the Sunday Times revealed that somebody who sponsors, a millionaire gallery owner who sponsors the event, was then kind of asking for money from others for her own charitable causes to get tickets to the event, and basically the more money you gave, up to about £20,000, effectively the closer you would get to the prince and possibly even the princess. Obviously the palace weren't aware of this, and the minute they were informed about it, they absolutely cut ties with this woman. She's not commenting about it, saying she can't comment because she's got privacy agreements, which sounds a little convenient to me. But they have openly cut ties with her. I just think it was a bit unfortunate. It wasn't like a member of their own staff offering this. It was someone who was associated with it, but not really at the heart of it. But it's still not great publicity.
No, but Richard, I know that you were annoyed that they were even linked to this.
Yes, I mean, it's a very difficult subject of charities and the royals, because we know they do fantastic work, and in William and Catherine's case they have their Royal Foundation. Then William has his Earthshot Prize, which is fantastic, but it needs a lot of money to fund it. In the case of the Earthshot Prize, they're handing out big amounts of money. And what that means is that you need that constant inflow of money from rich donors. And so you will attract people who want to get close to, to the royal family, not necessarily for the right reasons. And so I think there's always that element of trouble that sort of lurks around the corner with these type of things. And from my perspective, personally, I would much prefer them to go back to the old school way of doing things that Queen Elizabeth did, Princess Anne still does, which is just be patron of existing charities. So the charities themselves will be very well established, say Save the Children in Princess Anne's case, and they'll do most of the work, and then you attend fundraising dinners or different events
and
connected to it.
And you're not setting up competing charities for funds. It's
No.
Yeah.
So in the case of Prince William now, he is actively seeking the money from people to fund these ventures, which they're fantastic things, but it does leave you more vulnerable. And I think, and particularly, when you're the head of state, as now we have an extraordinary situation with the king, where he has the King's Foundation, which needs all this money still. So we've never had that with previous monarchs, and I think I would suggest a recipe for trouble. However,
you mean the King's Trust?
There's two. There's
okay.
What used to be the Prince's Trust, and the Prince's Foundation. So they're both fantastic charities, right?
Yeah.
But when he's continued to have them, even while he's head of state. So you can have someone thinking, I know a good way to try to, influence British head of state is to donate to charity.
So that's interesting, because as you say, he's the first monarch we've had who's in that situation. There's no precedent, there's no rules for what happens when somebody is our head of state?
No, I mean, before Charles became king, there was lots of speculation that he would have to wind down these ventures, and I think he himself hoped that Prince William would take over them, so at least there was a bit more distance. But I think Prince William made clear he didn't want to, because he had his own ventures.
This is all getting very complicated.
As a result, they've kept going. Like, yes, they're at sort of one remove, but people get involved in them because they know it brings them close to the king. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with it, and I would prefer them to go back to the old ways.
Well, we've got lots more to come on the show, including your comments and an extraordinary revelation about the late Queen and Meghan Markle. Before then, though, we're going to stick with the royals and their money, because, Rebecca, we found out this week that the king is losing his personal train because it just costs too much. Tell us what you know about this. What have we found out?
Well, on Monday we have what's known as the annual Sovereign Grant Review. So we basically have a big report from the palace. I have minutes to go through and then ask some questions on, but then I can kind of delve into it later. And as we all know, the devil is in the detail on these things. And it basically tells
us...
And you're the devil. It basically tells us how much money, public money, they get and what they spend it on. And there's often some obvious headline figures, but there was a headline story this year, and that was that they have decided, I would say at long last, and I'm sure Richard's going to disagree with me on this, to axe the royal train. It is a wonderful historical institution, but it costs a lot of money, and it is, you know, several million a year, because it's not just the cost of it, it costs them while it's in the sidings, you know, it's racking up bills before it even comes out on the rail tracks. And the big issue for the palace was that Queen Elizabeth loved it because it allowed her to travel in a lot of privacy, more comfort, more safety. So when she died, they said, look, we're going to keep this under review, but it was quite clear there was a bit of an X on its back. And what's really turned their viewpoint on it is that, you know, even the most recent carriages date back to the 1980s, so it needs quite a complete overhaul, and that is going to cost a lot of money.
Right.
Parts of it are so old, they've got to try and spend a fortune even getting spare parts for it. So they've just decided, look, for the sake of expediency, it's got to go. But what they do want to do is now start to speak in the next 2 years as it's decommissioned. They're going to take it around the country so people can still see it for the last time, and they're going to speak to museums and things like that to try and see if there's a way of publicly displaying it, a bit like they do with the Royal Yacht Britannia in Scotland.
I think they should park it somewhere and make it into a little hotel. Where you can go
Like
and,
a yotel.
Yeah. Don't you think?
yotel.
What about you, Richard? Are you upset about this?
I just think it's a great shame. It's another bit of royal history. I mean, you remember a rare occasion we saw Queen Elizabeth shedding a tear was at decommissioning ceremony for Royal Yacht Britannia, because she remembered all the lovely trips, and our viewers might have seen some of those old sort of cine films from their holidays on the Britannia, and it was a really useful tool for diplomacy and sort of, you know, sending the royals abroad. And I just think the royal train, it's just great to have it. It's a great bit of history.
But isn't it not also a bit of an eco way to travel?
Yes, I mean, we should be
the royal
encouraging
family?
railways, and the only reason it was so expensive was because it wasn't used very much. So, you know, I would have said use it more. So instead, what they tend to do is use helicopters. So we've got...
Well, this is my point.
I think they've got 2 helicopters that are funded. They're very expensive, but they're also extremely dangerous. I mean, just recently we had that awful tragedy in New York where a helicopter went down. You know, I'd much rather they would, you know, have lovely journeys on the train. And, oh, come on, I mean, you know, they can't have a yacht, they can't have a train. What next? They're all going to be on motorbikes. I mean, you know...
I can see Princess Anne on a motorbike. Not sure about the rest of them.
Well, Prince William does ride a motorbike.
Okay.
I don't know. Look, I studied history at university, so I love anything to do with history and culture and things like that. But I think it's just very difficult to justify that level of cost in the current climate, when literally last year it was only used twice, at an average of £38,000 per journey, let alone
But that's my
maintenance
point, that
costs.
the average is so high because they used it so little. So use it regularly when they're going to Sandringham or wherever, and, you know, it would be... I just think it would be great. But anyway, I've obviously lost that argument, so at least turn it into a nice hotel.
It is an argument. I'm sure people, you know, I could see a lot of disappointment on social media when I started breaking it that this was happening, when the embargo lifted. And I can see a lot of people were disappointed, so you're definitely not alone.
I mean,
Richard.
Britannia in Leith in Edinburgh has been a big tourist attraction.
Well, there you
know?
go. I think the train could definitely be.
But have you seen the inside of the train?
Of course I haven't seen the inside of it.
Well, there are brilliant pictures. You must
Okay.
have a look, because it is just not what you'd expect. They're kind of in those little, what I call the fish finger beds. It's kind of almost avocado bathroom suites. I mean, really, it's...
Fantastic. That's
a
exactly
train
what you want to hear.
that time has, you know, has not forgotten.
Well, what do you think? Do you think the King will have to tighten his belt in any other area?
They're constantly having to look at belt tightening. That said, they will see a huge uplift in their finances. I think it's, you know, we should, in interest of transparency, say. So at the moment, for the last 4 years, the sovereign grant has remained flat at like £86.5 million, which is a significant amount of money, although when you compare it with heads of state of other countries, I'm not sure how that figures. But for the next 2 years, they're going to be given an extra £100 million to finish off the repairs at Buckingham Palace.
Okay.
So they are looking at belt tightening in some areas, but in others, they will get a significant more amount of money for a short period of time.
How does the belt tightening square, Richard, with this £600,000 flower bed that's been reported? Did that stick out to you in the financial update?
I'm certainly looking forward to seeing those flower beds.
How good can a flower bed be?
This is at Windsor Castle. They've had an area that's been newly landscaped and it's all very pretty, but it has been very expensive.
These better be the best freaking flowers in the world.
When I was going through the report, as I say, the devil's in the detail, and I spotted it there. So I actually asked a question about it and said, look, I see what you're doing with the Royal Train. It's very laudable. This is a question I asked to the keeper of the Privy Purse, who's basically the kind of royal bean counter. I said, but how do you square that with £605,000?
£605,000.
And redeveloping it on the Rose Garden at Windsor. And he said, well, we'll make it more accessible, and it's going to allow more visitors to come in and enjoy it. But another one actually I raised, which might prove a little controversial, and I bow in no one to my respect for Princess Anne. I think she's an absolute legend. But there was a figure that did surprise me in the accounts, and that is her use of private jets to go and watch Scotland rugby. Play
we need to get her on that motorbike quicker than we thought.
In Edinburgh, and they chartered a plane for her 4 times in a year to go and support Scottish rugby
This is where the Royal Train should have been used. It's a lovely railway journey from London
didn't she do it by
up the
train?
East Coast.
Well, it cost £80,000 to do that for those 4 trips.
80,000 each, or
no, 80,000.
Right, okay, I was going to say
roughly about £20,000.
Yeah.
I hope Scotland won.
Per journey. Now, I should stress it's in her role as patron.
Apparently not, I'm hearing in my ear.
It's in her role as patron of Scottish rugby, so there was a reason. It wasn't just on a jolly.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think, again, they have this thing called the Royal Visits Committee, who, when the requests come in from different organisations, can we have a member of the royal family to go to this? It has to go through the Royal Visits Committee, and they will ascertain whether it's a proper use of their time, of money. And I do think, I'm really sorry, Princess Anne, you do have to slightly question things like that. I'll probably get a load of abuse for that, but
But it's a question worth asking.
I think you have to ask these questions. It's your job as a reporter to do so.
That is your job, and you do it brilliantly. Never let it be said otherwise. We're going to stick with the King and Queen and Anne for a second, because, Rebecca, you rushed back to be with us from last night from a trip north of the border with Charles and Camilla. What was the occasion?
So it's called Royal Week, and it's the annual week that the monarch spends in Scotland.
Isn't every week Royal Week when you're the king?
But this is a week he specifically spends in Edinburgh, and he actually takes up residence at a place called the Palace of Holyrood House. Now, if you do go to Edinburgh, it is definitely worth going. It's one of my favourite royal residences because it's big but small, if you know what I mean. It's
not really.
It's bigger than my house. It's bigger than your houses. But there's an intimacy about it as a royal residence. It's got amazing views of Arthur's Seat and the countryside. So he has a big reception ceremony, and then does engagements in and around the Edinburgh area for the entire week. And it's it's fantastic.
Nice. I love Edinburgh. Isn't it beautiful?
Oh yeah, it's an amazing city.
But there was an occasion with keys that was getting a lot of attention online. What was that?
Oh, that will be the ceremony of the keys, which is when he arrives. So you have all the military there welcoming him, and he's presented on a red cushion the key to Edinburgh, because he's now there as monarch. And he then goes, "Thank you very much, but I'm going to hand it straight back to you, because you will look after it, my ladies and gentlemen, so well that I can leave it in your hands." So it's a little bit of a kind of theatrics and a little bit of history, but it's great.
Marvellous. Now, they've obviously been very busy lately, and along with Princess Anne, who was up there. How did you think they were looking?
Great, actually. I spent quite a lot of time with the King and Queen, and I saw Princess Anne at the garden party they had at Holyrood. I loved it, actually. Her and the Queen, they come down these kind of steps down into the garden, and I could at first only see their top halves, and it looked like the Queen and Princess Anne were wearing identical outfits, and I was like, ooh, someone hasn't been coordinating. But actually Princess Anne was a jacket over a floral dress.
Oh, thank goodness, that would have been just a terrible faux pas.
But and actually the King was on really, really good form. He looked well, and he was clearly really enjoying himself. So I think I can happily wave goodbye to them for their summer holidays soon, knowing that they're they're in quite a good place.
Oh, we love that. Well, we are going to get to your comments in a minute, but Rebecca, before we do, speaking of royal waves, you want to give a little one to a viewer you met in Scotland.
Oh yes, at the garden party, I met a lovely lady. I'm looking at you, Richard. Called Vilma Marshall.
Hi, Vilma.
Who her daughter grabbed me and said she loves the programme and wanted to say hello. But she particularly wanted to say hello to you, Richard.
Oh, all our lady viewers love Richard.
Well, next time I'm coming with you, Rebecca.
Oh, who she said, makes me laugh when you say.
Go on.
She said, but I like to call him Garden of.
Okay, well, you were at a garden party, to be fair.
Garden of Eden.
So,
There you are,
yeah,
okay.
you have fans in Scotland.
You're making me blush.
Yeah, you have fans in Scotland.
Do any other viewers call our Richard Garden of Eden? Or have you got any nicknames for Richard that I specifically need to know about so I can just tease him mercilessly on our WhatsApp
He's
group?
actually lost for words.
Come on, give me some ammo, you guys. I've run out of imagination. I see him every day.
Well, let's change the subject, please.
Oh, I think not. I can't wait for next week now. Well, a comment from last week had us asking whether we had many viewers in the Caribbean, and so many of you got in touch. Here's just a few. Angie from Trinidad and Tobago, another Angie from Jamaica, along with Lisa and James as well. Denise from St. Lucia, Camille from the Bahamas, Celia from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Philomena, Tony, Yvonne from Barbados, Caitlin in the Cayman Islands, Joanna from St. Kitts, Tonya from Grenada, and Janice, who was watching from a yacht in Carriacou, you glamorous thing, which is an island north of Grenada. So if there's anyone we missed, we're sorry, we don't mean to. And if any of you are on any other islands that we haven't mentioned, let us know and we'll give you a royal wave. This week we also want to give a quick shout out to two countries that popped up in our comments. Catherine, who watches us in Tirana, which is the capital of Albania, and JNW, who says, I know people ignore us, Gibraltarian here. We'd never ignore the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar in this show, never. So if there are any more viewers from Albania or Gibraltar or nearby, do let us know in the comments below. Now, lots of you loved our montage last week that we made to mark Prince William's birthday, like Grandma Mouse, who said, that was the most beautiful photo montage you've ever done. What a lovely tribute to Prince William. While Finnegan William, meanwhile, wanted to praise the King for his recent support of Canada. As a Canadian, I find it difficult to find the words to express the gratitude and love I have for His Majesty for taking the time and energy to come to Canada to reinforce our pride and remind us that we are part of something much larger. He is in the battle of his life, and with all that is happening in the world as well as his family, he came over here to reassure us that we are the true North, strong and free. Thank you, Your Majesty. Wow, some really great comments there, so thank you so much. We really could read more, but we've got a couple of other stories to get through that have been really quite extraordinary this week, so I'm going to get back to the panel now. Richard, is Meghan Markle in a jam? See what I did there? Has she spread herself too thinly?
It's not jam though, she keeps saying.
Oh, apparently it's a spread. Yes.
Spreads, yes. Yeah, I mean, we've talked on this programme many times about
a little bit.
Meghan's jam, and
Yeah.
There's been so much speculation about where it's actually produced. Now, because a lot of the sort of publicity around it, let's be honest, has been very misleading. Because at the start, she was giving out jars of jam, or whatever you want to call it, to friends. And this was from fruit from their own garden in Montecito, California. And so she sort of seemed to give the impression that, you know, actually I'm going to be giving more jam made from my own area, but that isn't the case. And to be fair to Meghan, she made clear from one video that it was produced in a factory. We saw the production of it, but we didn't know where that was. Well, anyway, according to an investigation by the Mail on Sunday, they revealed that it's being made in a factory 2,000 miles away in Illinois that makes products for lots of different brands. So it's a mass-produced, it's not organic.
It's not organic.
And it's no. I mean, to be fair, Meghan's never claimed it's organic, but that was a big thing, for example, for King Charles with his products, where they were sort of Dutchy organics, you know. So this is mass-produced stuff which is sent to her. But as we know, Meghan is the queen of of transferring things from different, vessels. So she'll take something and she'll put in a new one. What do you call that, you know?
I think you called it transferring something from one thing to another.
Anyway, so she takes it from one, puts it in another with a
Decanting?
Decanting,
Yeah,
that's the word I was
yeah.
looking for. So she's the queen of decanting. So she'll take something, put it in a new jar, slap on a fancy label, and she'll charge you 3 times the price that you can get it.
I've got to
exactly
be honest,
the same stuff
I wish
elsewhere.
I'd thought of it. Don't you?
Yeah, but so
Yeah.
it's all about the marketing, really, as we've suspected.
Yeah, it doesn't sound that royal. It sort of like sounds the opposite of it, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like, you know, as Richard referred to, the King's Old Duchy brand, which does have that sort of more authentic feel.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting story in itself because Prince Charles, as he was then, got a lot of grief from British media and the British public when he started Duchy Originals. He was called a shop-soiled royal, I think, by one newspaper, which is a kind of name that stuck with him for a long time. But what's important to understand is the Duchy Originals brand was set up to firstly promote his love of organic farming and secondly to raise funds for the charities, as we discussed earlier on the programme. He supported, so not a penny of it went into his own pocket. He eventually basically sold, it got too big for him, it was so successful. He actually sold it to Waitrose, the big supermarket group. The big posh supermarket group, I should say, in the UK, in return for a significant donation to charity. I mean, several £100,000 a year going back to his charities each year. So he's never actually personally profited from it. And of course, that is the difference between him and his daughter-in-law, the Duchess of Sussex.
You can't beat those lemon Duchy biscuits with the icing on them. They're my favourite thing.
They do make some good
Or
stuff.
we'll bring some in for next week before we film then.
Can't eat them anymore, I'm gluten-free, but I do miss them. Anyway, I'll move on. Enough about me, because we've got an extraordinary story from the royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith, who has gone into details about the breakdown in the relationship between the late Queen Elizabeth and both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Rebecca, this has been quite the jaw-dropper this week. What can you tell us about this and the extraordinary source that she's referred to?
I think it's what we call in our business as a marmalade dropper.
Yeah.
It was always the test of a daily newspaper. Is that story you're going to put on people's tables in the morning a marmalade dropper that they will want to read over breakfast? And this certainly was one of those, I think. Sally Bedell Smith, who's actually a very respected and long-standing royal biographer, released on her Substack, which I think is something you can subscribe to.
Yeah.
Really quite extraordinary revelations, quoting the Queen's cousin, late cousin I should say, Lady Elizabeth Anson. And Lady Elizabeth Anson had reported on what the Queen had said about Meghan. And both obviously the two people involved in that conversation are no longer with us, but there's enough about it that has a ring of truth for me for certain amounts of it. It ties in with things I've heard as well. And basically she said that they felt that while Harry may love Meghan, they weren't convinced about her feeling towards him. You know, there were various aspects about the wedding and the run-up to the wedding that they weren't happy with. And it just conveyed the Queen's very strong sense of unease about what was going on and where that relationship would end up going. And I think, you know, we're often criticised as journalists for having anonymous royal sources, and there's a reason why, because, you know, people are trying to protect themselves and we're trying to protect them. But obviously this is a rare case where somebody is being quoted by name and on the record, and I think that does have currency.
So interesting. And Richard, one of the claims is that Harry was, quote unquote, rude to the Queen for 10 minutes during a meeting. What's that all about?
Well, that sort of ties in with stuff we have heard before, and it was about the tensions in the build-up to the royal wedding. We've heard hints of this before from to do with Angela Kelly, who's the dresser, right-hand woman of the Queen, where the viewers might remember the rouser over the tiara, and it's written about quite a lot in Prince Harry's memoirs. And it was all about, essentially, it was sort of Meghan's sense of entitlement. She was sort of demanding, I want this or that. And Angela Kelly was very protective and was sort of, well, that's not quite how things work. And we heard that. Do you remember the line about, you know, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets, that we heard from Harry? And it was those sort of tensions, I think. So you can imagine the meeting, but the one that really struck in my mind from these revelations from Sally Bedell Smith is that the Queen had a meeting, just her and Meghan, I think just shortly before the wedding, and the Queen asked her about her dress, and Meghan wouldn't tell her anything about it. And if you think about it, it's so disrespectful, because it's suggesting, like, I don't trust you, as if you're going to go and sort of, you're going to go and announce details of my dress to everyone.
Or do you think that she maybe took umbrage at the inference that I could have approval over what you're wearing, which is the case, probably, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we'd heard before from Lady Elizabeth Anson, I think since her death, I think Katie Nicholl, the reporter, had said that the Queen had expressed reservations about Meghan wearing a white dress with a veil for her wedding, because she was a divorcee.
Oh, that's so old-fashioned, though, isn't it?
And just
she was an older lady.
I mean, you can understand her kind of feeling that was inappropriate. So I think that's probably why she was interested. But for Meghan, it does seem a bit of a sort of clash, you know, for Meghan not to tell her about it.
What about this absolutely blistering comment about the Sussexes, which said, Harry is neither bright nor strong, and she is both. What do you make of that? And that's the face I pulled. Like, oh.
Pointed.
Yeah.
Pointed. There's one bit I struggle on that, and I struggle to see Queen Elizabeth saying something quite so harsh about her grandson.
Oh, my understanding was that this was the lady in waiting who said this.
But I think what the piece is suggesting is that she is echoing Queen Elizabeth's thoughts, and that I struggle with a little bit. But you know, I know from my own sources that there were strong reservations, that all of the family felt that Harry was rushing into this too quickly. He needed to, as we now know, William memorably said to him, maybe just take a little bit of time to get to know this woman and you know, plan your future more. But he was so desperate to settle down and start a family that he just and he as a person fell in love very quickly, that he just didn't want to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's been suggested that the Queen wasn't quite so quick to fall in love with Meghan. Perhaps the jury was out over whether or not the Queen liked her.
Yes, I mean, I think that, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say the Queen disliked her, but I know from my own sources that she was bemused and saddened by some of Meghan's behaviour, but their behaviour as a couple. Yeah. And it did overshadow her last few years of life, of course. And there was some fundamental misunderstandings. So Sally Bedell Smith mentions, and it sounds quite niche in the circumstances, but I do think it gets to the crux of the issue, that she was really quite unhappy that Meghan wanted and Harry wanted the Archbishop of Canterbury to marry them at St George's Chapel at Windsor, because actually that was the Dean of Windsor's territory, and it really shouldn't have happened. And I know it sounds very niche and almost silly, but actually when you know about the setup of things, it really was the Dean's territory, and I think it kind of illustrated how she felt there was a fundamental misunderstanding from this couple about how things worked. And for that, it didn't sit comfortably with her.
Well, come on, we've seen that before, because you might remember in their Oprah Winfrey interview that Meghan actually said, you know what, we got married the night before. Yeah. Because they got the Archbishop of Canterbury round to their
the backyard,
as she called it.
3 days before.
And they got married, and we know what that was. In reality, that was a rehearsal, you know, it was kind of going through their vows. But she said, for us, that was a wedding, and that caused awful confusion, because the church actually had to issue a formal statement to say, we did not marry them the day before, i.e. break the law.
I think they suggested it was just basically a blessing, wasn't it, ahead of their big day, but as in the church suggesting that. But it did put the Archbishop of Canterbury in a really difficult position.
So we called the Archbishop of Canterbury, that's why I was just like...
And he had been a big supporter of Harry and Meghan, because they'd had their kind of marital lessons. They would spend time with him, discussing their feelings and where things were going as part of these kind of getting to know you sessions and to run up to the wedding.
And Meghan's confirmation into the Church of England.
But they totally, you know, threw him to the wolves over that completely, put him in a really awkward situation.
And I think the most damning comment of all actually was from Lady Elizabeth rather than the Queen herself, where she said, you know, we hope that Meghan's in love with Harry, but we actually fear she's engineered this.
Blimey.
And you think, oh, engineered, it's all a bit awkward, isn't it?
It's just, it's some strong words indeed. Do you think that it seems likely that, you know, when historians do come back to look at this relationship and all these relationships revolving around the Sussex in the years to come, that accounts like this will have a really strong bearing on what history decides happened?
Definitely. I think this really does seem to be the first evidence of what Queen Elizabeth felt about Meghan, and it's not good. The fact it's in writing from a royal biographer, it does sort of lend it that historical element to it. I mean, it's always uncomfortable though when people saying things from people who are dead. I have to say I knew Lady Elizabeth a bit. I went to quite a few of her parties, and she never said anything controversial to me.
Right.
Perhaps that's because I'm a social diarist. She knows that I put it in the paper straight away.
Maybe she didn't like you.
So she may have confided in me. To be completely honest, she did actually ban me from her parties.
Okay, so she was never going to tell you anything.
After something I wrote. Okay, I shouldn't really say these things, particularly not when we've got some viewers. But she banned me from her parties, but I turned up anyway, so I gate crashed one. And she
He's a proper journalist, isn't he? He's a proper soldier.
This is why he's such a good diarist.
But she greeted me as a long-lost son and kissed me at the entrance to the hotel and said, you know, lovely to see you. And then her cousin, the Queen, entered shortly after. So I'm not sure if she was confused as to who I was, but it was a great party, and I celebrate her memory. but I'm not going to pretend she said anything controversial about Meghan or the Queen or anyone. So.
Good.
I love the idea you're getting banned from parties, Richard. It's brilliant.
So it happens all the time.
Does it?
Yeah. I'm sure you'll get a few invites after today's. Well, let's turn our attention to southwest London now and to the Wimbledon tennis champions, which are happening. Rebecca, we saw Fergie in the Royal Box, and that's the first time in a while.
Yeah, and I think, it shows a sign of how kind of magnanimous King Charles has been. And, you know, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations with Sarah Duchess of York over the years, but he's made very clear that he's going to continue his late mother's attempts to bring her slightly more back into the fold. She's obviously had a lot of health troubles over, you know, the last few years, and actually is a kind of a well of support to his brother, Prince Andrew. However badly he may have behaved, he doesn't want him to be unhappy. So I think it's a sign of the kind of the King's kindness.
And I think a lot of people, Richard, will have been heartened to see Lady Gabriella Windsor there as well.
Yeah, that was lovely to see Ella Windsor there. She was with a friend, clearly enjoying the tennis in the sunshine, and just after everything she's been through. Obviously her husband died in tragic circumstances not so long ago, so to see her hopefully enjoying life a bit again was really heartening.
Really nice. Now, obviously, some of you will yell at me and tell me to leave her alone, but of course, everyone is hoping to catch a glimpse of Katherine. Rebecca, what do you think the likelihood is?
I think there's a very good chance. I've been told to expect her at some point during the championships. I can't tell you when, I don't know. I doubt it would be this week because we've seen her out and about. Maybe next week. Although we do have.
You've got to wait for the semis.
We have the French state visit starting on Tuesday next week. So that's a very, very big deal, and she will be playing. My understanding is, as long as all is well, a very big part in that.
Yeah.
So there's quite a flurry of activity towards the end of term before the summer holidays, but I'm told we can expect her.
Okay. You might remember that very moving sort of wave of applause for Katherine when she appeared at Wimbledon last year after all her health battles.
And we could see her kind of almost bite her lip, didn't we, and how much it meant to her, because obviously she would have been going through her chemotherapy treatment then, I think. So, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, did you hear that? That's right. That fanfare means it's time to celebrate an unsung royal hero. Now, Rebecca, you're nominating a group of unsung heroes from north of the border.
Yeah, it really struck me this week when I was up in Edinburgh for Royal Week, and I want to nominate the Royal Company of Archers, who basically are the Sovereign's bodyguard in Scotland. And we're obviously very used to seeing the sovereign being guarded by the Guards regiments down here, the Welsh, the Scottish, and the Grenadier Guard, things like that. But we're not used to seeing it in Scotland because it doesn't happen so much. And they have, sorry, I know this is really, really trite, but they have the most amazing uniforms.
Oh no, I'm always here for an amazing uniform.
With these eagle feathers coming out of them. And I actually asked one of them, you know, why have you got 2 eagle feathers? Why have most of them got 1 and he's got 3? And that's because the amount of eagle feathers signifies how high up the ranks you are, and the head honcho had 3. I should point out, actually, I think for the first time in about 400 years, we have lady archers this year. There's about 6 or 7 lady archers. So the wheels are still turning. It's taken 400 years, but there are lady archers, and with some very worthy recipients. And actually, I asked another one. I said, how do you get to be an archer? Is it ex-military? And apparently, although a lot of them have military links, it's not a given. He said to me, oh, you just have to be very nice and very Scottish.
Okay.
But then he kind of laughed and said, and actually you have to be, you know, have done something worthy in your career, and then you have to be nominated someone. So it's quite a kind of a tight club to get into.
That's me out on all of those. cross. Not nice, not Scottish.
But I just, and what was so nice, you know, for example, when we were at the Palace of Holyrood House and we had the garden party, they were there, they were on duty, they were smiling, they were helping people. Oh, actually, I forgot to say, where you see normal people with like swords and stuff, they have bows and arrows.
Quite right too, as well.
And kind of like almost like longbow sized bows. So it's just a real spectacle and really added to the sense of occasion. So that's who I want to nominate.
Sounds amazing. Great nomination there. Well, we mentioned Wimbledon just a moment ago, and it is one of the highlights of the British summer season. We all love it, and has long maintained a royal connection. So we thought we'd bring together some wonderful pictures of the family at the tennis championships over the years. If that hasn't got you in the mood for tennis, I don't know what will. We'll hopefully bring you more royal tennis news over the next couple of weeks. And up next, our experts react to some extraordinary portrayals of the late Queen. That's on Acting Royal, so you can click here for that. Just time to say thanks to them for being on my panel, Richard and Rebecca, and to you, of course, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.